Malik Vance was 42 years old, and he believed, quietly, firmly, the way a man believes in the weight of good tools, that loyalty was the only currency that never lost its value. He had spent 14 years building that belief into something real: a marriage, a legacy, a family name he had helped rescue from the edge of ruin with his own two hands and every dollar he owned. He was not loud about it. Malik was never loud about anything. He was the kind of man who fixed the leak before you noticed the ceiling was wet. And then, on a humid Tuesday night in October, his wife of 14 years threw his suitcases into the hallway of their Buckhead penthouse and told him he was nothing. Not in anger, not in grief, in celebration. What Brianna Vance did not know, what she could not have known, because she had been too busy counting her inheritance to read the fine print, was this: the $50 million she had just inherited was not a gift. It was structured debt, and Malik was the only person on earth with the legal authority to call it in. Before we go any further, if you have ever given everything you had to someone who looked right through you like you were furniture, stay with me. This one is going to matter to you. Atlanta, Georgia, October, 9:47 in the evening. The kind of night that starts warm and turns on you, the way some people do. The air was thick with the smell of rain that had not quite decided to fall, and the amber lights along Peachtree Road blurred softly against the wet pavement below. Malik had worked 14 hours that day. A commercial development site in Midtown had hit a snag with the foundation inspection, third time that month. And he had been on site since 6 in the morning, sleeves rolled up, walking the crew through it the way he always did. Steady, patient, one problem at a time. He drove home in his old pickup truck, a 2014 Ford F-150 with a crack in the dashboard he had been meaning to fix for 2 years. The radio played low. He had a thermos of lukewarm coffee in the cup holder and a grocery list folded in his jacket pocket. He had planned to pick up cilantro for the chicken soup he promised to make on Sunday. He was thinking about cilantro when he pulled into the parking garage and saw the suitcases. 2 of them, his, set side by side in the glass-lined corridor outside the penthouse door, as if a hotel porter were expected. His father's old Seiko watch, kept tucked in the inside pocket of the larger bag, had slipped out and was lying on the marble floor, face down. He stood there for a moment, just stood. Then he picked up the watch, turned it over in his palm, checked the face. Not cracked. Good. The penthouse door opened before he could reach for it, and there was Brianna. 5 feet 8 inches of composed fury in a black Versace dress he had never seen before. The price tag probably still warm from being cut off that morning. Her hair was pinned in the high coil she wore when she wanted to feel powerful. Diamond earrings, a new necklace, and in her eyes, something Malik had never seen aimed at him quite so directly before. Contempt. Malik. She said his name the way you say the name of something you have outgrown. I had Gerald bring your things down. I think it is cleaner this way. He looked at her. He said nothing. We are not on the same level anymore. She gestured at the penthouse behind her, the city view, the Italian tile, the chandelier scattering light across her collarbone. I have $50 million now. $50 million. And you are still driving that truck and coming home smelling like a construction site. She paused, selecting her word with care. This is not a partnership anymore. You sure you want to end it like this, Brianna? His voice was low and even. There is no going back from this. She laughed, a bright, empty sound, and said, Get out. The door closed. The electronic lock beeped once. clean, final, like a gavel coming down. Malik stood in the hallway. The rain that had been threatening all evening finally arrived, drifting in through the open corridor window, misting his face, beating on the shoulders of his wrinkled work shirt. He looked down at his father's watch. He wound it once, the way he always did when he needed to think, and listened to the small, precise tick of a thing that kept perfect time no matter what was happening around it. Then he smiled. It was a small smile, quiet, the kind a man wears when a long, carefully built plan arrives at the moment it was always heading toward. Because Brianna had just declared herself the owner of $50 million. She had imagined herself free, from her marriage, from obligation, from the steady and devoted man she had decided was beneath her. What she had not imagined, not even once in all her planning, was the truth that had been sitting quietly inside every document, every account, every property title, including the one on the penthouse she had just locked him out of. The $50 million was not clean money. It was fully leveraged, structured debt, secured against a private trust with exactly one creditor. One person holding the legal power to call in every cent. The man standing in the corridor, holding an old Seiko watch in the rain. She had thrown out the one person who held the keys to everything she thought she had just won. And she had absolutely no idea. Stay with me, because in just a moment, we are going back 7 years to the day Malik gave up everything to save the company his wife would one day try to steal from him. Before we go on, drop a comment right now. If your spouse inherited millions overnight and told you, "We're not on the same level anymore," would you walk away quietly or fight back? Yes equals walk away. No equals fight back. Tell us in 2 words. 7 years ago, Malik Vance had a savings account, a modest townhouse in East Atlanta, and a wife who still looked at him like he hung the moon. He also had a problem. Hayes Construction, Brianna's family company, the one her father Reginald had built from a 2-man operation into one of Atlanta's most respected mid-sized contractors, was 48 days from bankruptcy. The bank was calling. Vendors had not been paid in 4 months. The foremen were showing up out of loyalty because there was nothing left in the payroll account. Brianna was in tears. Reginald was too proud to ask for help and too worn down. The early signs of illness had begun, though no one was saying anything plainly yet, to fight the way he once had. Malik did not make a speech. He sat down at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and a cup of coffee and started doing the math. Then he sold his townhouse. He cashed out his retirement savings, paid the early withdrawal penalty without flinching. He called in every professional favor he had built over 12 years in commercial construction. He negotiated directly with the bank, not a lawyer, not a middleman, but him, in a conference room with 3 senior loan officers who underestimated the calm man in the slightly too large sport coat. He restructured the debt, revived 4 stalled contracts, and within 11 months, Hayes Construction was not only solvent, it was growing. Reginald Hayes shook his son-in-law's hand in the driveway of his Cascade Heights home on a Sunday afternoon, and the old man's eyes were wet. "You did not have to do that, son." "Yes, sir," Malik said simply. "I did." At church that following Sunday, Brianna had held his arm and whispered, "You are my hero." That was 7 years ago. Reginald was diagnosed with stage 3 pancreatic cancer not long after the company's recovery. He was a stubborn man. Georgia Clay was softer, and he held on for 2 years. But 18 months before that October night in the corridor, he checked into Emory Hospital for the last time and asked to speak with Malik alone. Brianna was in the waiting room, scrolling her phone. She assumed it was a routine conversation, maybe instructions about company operations. She was not entirely wrong about that. Reginald Hayes had spent the final chapter of his life watching his daughter very carefully. And what he observed had broken something in him, quietly, the way illness breaks things. Because a father's love does not make him blind. It only makes the truth harder to carry. He had noticed the way Brianna stopped asking about the business and started asking about the financial accounts. He had seen the attorney she had been spending time with, a polished man named Darius Langford, whose interest in Brianna had far less to do with affection than with what she stood to inherit. He had been shown, by his own accountant, the first small financial irregularities. He had made his decision. Malik, the old man's voice was thin but steady. He took his son-in-law's hand. "I am going to tell you something, and I need you to hear all of it before you say a word." Malik sat. He listened. "I have restructured the entire estate. Every asset, the company, the properties, the accounts, all 50 million of it, has been transferred into a private, irrevocable trust. That trust carries an equal debt obligation built into its structure. You are the sole beneficiary." He paused. "And the primary creditor. The only one who can call the debt in." Malik was quiet for a long moment. "She is your daughter," he said. "She is," Reginald said. "And I love her. But I love this legacy more than I love her comfort. And I love you enough to be honest about what I see." He held Malik's hand firmly. "Do not show your hand. Let her believe what she is going to believe. When she makes the choice I fear she will make, because I know my child. Step in and protect what I built. Not for punishment, for preservation." Malik looked at the old man for a long time. "Yes, sir," he said. "I hear you." 6 weeks after Reginald Hayes was laid to rest, a beautiful service at Big Bethel AME, 300 people, the mayor sent flowers. Gloria Vance called her son on a Wednesday evening. Gloria was 65 years old, direct as a ruler, and possessed the particular gift that certain mothers have of seeing exactly what is happening in their children's lives, from any distance, through any wall. She had been at Bacchanalia restaurant in West Midtown celebrating her church friend Dolores's retirement when she saw Brianna across the room. Tucked into a corner booth, leaning across the table toward a man in an expensive suit, his hand over hers. The kind of lean that does not happen on a business dinner. Gloria watched for 2 minutes. She paid her check. She went home. Then she texted Malik. "Baby, your wife is not being your wife right now." Malik was sitting in his truck in the parking garage of the Midtown job site, rain on the windshield, cold coffee in the cup holder. He read the message twice. He thought about his father's watch. The idea that as long as you kept the mechanism going, it would always tell you the truth. He texted back, "I know, Mom. I am preparing." That night, he called Aisha Thompson. Aisha Thompson ran a forensic audit law practice out of a quiet office on Peachtree Center Avenue. She wore dark suits, thin-framed glasses, and an expression that suggested she had heard every version of every story and was interested only in what could be documented. She and Malik had worked briefly together during the original Hayes financial restructuring. She was the sharpest attorney he had ever encountered. He told her everything that evening. The trust structure, the debt obligation, Reginald's instructions, his mother's message. She listened without interrupting, made 3 notes on her legal pad, and said, "How long do you want to give this?" "Long enough for the facts to build themselves," Malik said. 18 months, Aisha said. It was not a question. 18 months, he agreed. From that night forward, Malik and Aisha conducted a parallel operation, invisible, precise, and entirely patient. A full forensic audit of Hayes Construction's finances going back 36 months. Careful legal transfers of lien positions. The methodical acquisition of the bank mortgage on the Buckhead penthouse, restructured through the trust. Every document filed correctly, every signature notarized, every loose thread secured. And through all of it, Malik came home on time. He cooked dinner on Sundays. He drove his old F-150. He sat at the end of the couch each evening with project files on his lap, saying nothing about the new perfume, nothing about the late evenings, nothing about the way Brianna had stopped meeting his eyes at breakfast. Some nights she came home at 11 or midnight, and Malik would be reading in the living room. He would look up and say, "Long day?" She would say, and walk past him to the bedroom and close the door. He would sit in the quiet, the refrigerator humming, distant traffic on Peachtree, and wind his father's watch, and think about patience, about the difference between enduring something and understanding it, about how the two can look identical from the outside. Brianna told her closest friends that week that she planned to end the marriage soon. Malik sent Aisha a single text message: "Prepare the documents." What happened 2 weeks after she asked him to leave, and what Brianna staged in that Grand Hyatt ballroom to publicly humiliate him in front of Atlanta's finest, is something you need to hear. Because Malik did not simply show up that night. He arrived. 2 weeks after she asked him to leave, Brianna Vance decided to throw a party. Not just any party. She called it Inheritance and Rebirth. Had invitations printed on heavy cream cardstock. Hired an event planner. Reserved the Grand Hyatt Atlanta's main ballroom, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, for a Saturday evening in late October. She spent $11,000 organizing the event and charged every cent of it to the Hayes Construction corporate account, which she had been treating as a personal expense account for the better part of 18 months. The guest list ran over 200 names. Atlanta's established community, old money families, business owners, a city council member, senior pastors from the major congregations, and the kind of people who had known Reginald Hayes with deep respect and had watched his daughter grow up at their dinner tables and in their church pews. Brianna sent every invitation with a small handwritten note that said simply, "The next chapter begins." She wore a champagne-colored gown and the diamond necklace she had purchased the week after the funeral. She stood at the ballroom entrance at 7 o'clock with Darius Langford at her side. No longer a secret, no longer kept to corner booths across town, and greeted her guests with the wide, confident smile of a woman who believed she had finally claimed her rightful place. And then, because walking away was not dramatic enough for her, she had her assistant call Malik that morning. The message was simple. "Mrs. Vance requests your presence at this evening's event. The final divorce documents will be available for your signature at 9 o'clock. Not at an attorney's office, not in private, in a ballroom, in front of 200 people who mattered to her." She wanted witnesses. She wanted him to sign away the marriage, and what she believed were their shared marital assets, in public. She wanted Atlanta to see it. When her assistant confirmed he had agreed to attend, Brianna said, "Good. Let him have his dignity for one more hour." Malik spent that Saturday morning at his mother's house in East Point. Gloria made biscuits, the proper ones, with honey butter kept in the blue ceramic dish on the second shelf of the refrigerator, the dish that had been there since Malik was in grade school. He sat at the same kitchen table where he had done his homework 30 years ago and watched his mother work, comfortable in the silence between them, the way only old, familiar love allows. "You nervous?" Gloria asked, without turning from the stove. No, ma'am. She turned and looked at him, the long, patient reading look that takes decades to develop. You sure? He was quiet for a moment. I am sad, Mama. That is a different thing. Gloria set down her dish towel. She walked over and put both hands on his face, the way she had when he was small and trying very hard not to cry about something. Your father would be proud of you, she said. Reginald would be proud of you. Malik covered one of her hands with his and held it there briefly. I know, he said. He left her house at 6:30. At 7:55, a sleek black Rolls-Royce Cullinan, arranged through the trust, quiet and immaculate, pulled up in front of the Grand Hyatt. Malik stepped out in a deep charcoal suit, collar open by one button, no tie. Unhurried, completely composed. At his side was Aisha Thompson, in her standard dark suit, carrying a leather briefcase that was, at this point, approximately 3 inches thick with organized, notarized documentation. The valet held the door. Malik nodded at him. They went inside. The ballroom was full, warm, and luminous, the kind of room that makes the world feel well-ordered and prosperous and right. Malik moved through it the way he moved through job sites. Steady pace, observant, revealing nothing. He felt the room register his presence. Conversations paused. Heads turned. Eyes went wide and then thoughtful. Several people in this room had known him for years. A few had been to his wedding. The older guests, the ones who remembered the bankruptcy crisis 7 years ago, who knew what this man had sacrificed to save Reginald's life work, watched him cross that ballroom floor, and something in their expressions shifted. Brianna saw him from across the room, and her smile faltered for one unguarded moment before she reassembled it. She crossed toward him, champagne flute in hand, Darius a half step behind her. So you showed up, she said, lightly, for the room's benefit. I was beginning to think you would spare yourself the embarrassment. Malik looked at her steadily, not with anger, not unkindly, with the particular stillness of a man who has nothing to prove and is fully aware of it. You invited me, Brianna, he said. I did. She gestured toward a table at the center of the room, where a manila envelope rested between the floral centerpieces. The documents are right there. It will take 5 minutes. Before anything else tonight, Malik said, his voice carrying only as far as their small circle. I want to ask you one question. You have told this room, you have told all of these people, that you inherited $50 million. She lifted her chin. I did. Do you understand what that 50 million actually is? The room, which had been murmuring politely around them, grew noticeably quieter. Rooms do that when something real is about to happen. Brianna laughed, the bright, hollow sound he recognized from the corridor 2 weeks earlier. It is mine, she said. My father left it to me. Malik held her gaze for one more second. Then he nodded at Aisha. Aisha Thompson did not hurry. She set the briefcase on the edge of the banquet table, opened it without theater, and began placing documents, cleanly tabbed, professionally bound, in a precise row across the white linen cloth. She spoke without preamble. The Hayes estate, totaling approximately $50 million in assets, was restructured 18 months ago into a private, irrevocable trust. That trust was designed with a matching debt obligation, $50 million, built into its foundation. Every asset in the estate is secured against that debt. She paused. Mr. Malik Vance is the sole beneficiary of the trust. He is also the primary and only creditor. He alone holds the authority to call the debt. The room went completely still. Someone near the back set down their glass. Someone else drew a slow breath. Brianna's champagne flute trembled, barely, just enough, in her hand. She looked at the documents and then at Malik, and for the first time that evening, she was not performing. "That is," she swallowed. "That is not possible." "Page 4, Aisha said evenly, "is the trust certification, filed 18 months ago and notarized by 3 independent attorneys. Page 9 is the debt assignment documentation." She moved to the second stack of papers. "This is a separate matter entirely." She set down a bound forensic audit report, clean white cover, Hayes Construction letterhead. Over the past 18 months, approximately $2.8 million was transferred from Hayes Construction operating accounts into 2 private accounts. One registered to Brianna Vance, one registered to Darius Langford. This is documented through bank records, wire transfer confirmations, and internal accounting logs. It constitutes financial fraud. The room broke open. Not loudly. This was not a crowd that shouted, but the sound of 200 people responding simultaneously. The sharp intake of breath, the rush of low voices, the quick clinking of glasses set down was its own kind of thunder. The older guests, those who had known Reginald Hayes since before Brianna was born, those who remembered watching Malik quietly save this company with his own resources, those guests did not murmur. They looked at Darius Langford and then at Brianna, and their faces carried a judgment far heavier than any words. Darius had gone the color of old concrete. He looked at the documents, then at the exits. The practiced charm he carried everywhere had vanished completely, replaced by something pinched and calculating. Brianna forced a short laugh, less certain now, thinner. "You fabricated this," she said. Malik's voice was quiet, almost sorrowful. "Brianna, your father loved you, but he knew you, and he planned accordingly. Hold on, because what Malik pulled from the breast pocket of that charcoal suit next is the moment that broke Brianna completely. And it is the moment this entire story was building toward from the very first page." Aisha continued without pausing, the way a surgeon continues, not because the cutting is enjoyable, but because the patient requires it. "There is one additional matter," she said, setting a third document on the table. "At 3 o'clock this afternoon, Mr. Vance, acting through the trust, completed the legal acquisition of the outstanding mortgage on this Buckhead penthouse, currently registered in Brianna Vance's name. The transaction was finalized using funds from the trust he has been legally structuring over the past 18 months. She slid the document forward. "As of 3 o'clock today, that property belongs entirely to Malik Vance." A woman near the front of the room said quietly, "Lord, have mercy." The penthouse. The very one Brianna had stood in 2 weeks ago. Chandelier light on her diamond necklace, new Versace dress, electronic deadbolt beeping like a sentence, and told him they were no longer on the same level. He had owned it since mid-afternoon. He had owned it while she was having her hair done for this party. Brianna stared at the document on the table. Her expression moved through disbelief, then rapid calculation, and then down to something rawer and older than either of those. Something she had no practiced response for. Real fear. Not the manageable kind, the kind born from the sudden, vertiginous understanding that you have been catastrophically wrong, and that the ground you were certain of has not existed for a very long time. She looked at Malik. He was already reaching into the breast pocket of his suit. What he removed was not a legal document. It was a letter. A single sheet of paper, folded twice, soft at the creases from having been handled many times over 18 months. The paper had the slightly warm, lived-in quality of something that has been carried close to a person for a long time. The handwriting on the outside was unmistakable to anyone in that room who had ever received a note from Reginald Hayes. Deliberate, upright, old-fashioned cursive. Each letter spaced with the care of a man who believed that how you wrote said something about how you thought. Written on the outside, in Reginald's hand, "For the man who stayed." The room recognized the handwriting before a word was spoken. Malik saw it in their faces, particularly the older guests, those who had received birthday notes and holiday greetings and business correspondence in that same careful script for 30 years. A woman in the third row pressed her hand over her mouth. Malik unfolded the letter. His hands were completely steady. He cleared his throat once, not from emotion, simply from the acoustics of the large room, and began to read. His voice was low and unhurried. In the silence of that ballroom, it carried to every corner. Malik, my son, if you are reading this aloud, it means she made the choice I feared she would make. I am sorry for that. Sorry for you, and deeply sorry for her, because I know what she is losing even if she does not. No one in the room moved. I built Hayes Construction with my hands, my father's name, and 40 years of rising before sunrise. I nearly lost it once. You saved it. Not because it was your obligation, not because any law required it. You saved it because you are the kind of man who finishes what he starts and protects what he loves. Malik's jaw tightened slightly. His voice held. I could not leave this legacy to be consumed by greed. I could not look away from what I saw unfolding and call that love for my daughter. Real love does not make space for destruction. It prevents it. He glanced up briefly, not at Brianna, but at the older men near the rear of the room, the ones who had known Reginald Hayes since long before Brianna was born. They were nodding slowly. One of them had bowed his head. If my daughter ever removes you from this home, and I believe she will, because I know her heart and I grieve it, let her know this. The Hayes legacy was never built for greed. It was built to endure, to be passed to someone with the loyalty and the wisdom to protect it across generations. He folded the letter once. You are that person. You always have been. I am proud of you, son. Take care of what we built together. He folded it again. Reginald Hayes. The room held its silence for 4 full seconds. Then Brianna broke. She had maintained her posture through the entire reading. Chin elevated, champagne flute gripped in both hands now. Every line of her body saying she would not allow this room to see her fall. And then the letter was folded, and her father's voice was somehow in the air of that ballroom, present in a way that had nothing to do with sound, and something in her gave completely. She moved forward in one sudden, desperate lunge, reaching for the letter with both hands, as though taking possession of the paper could undo what the words had already done to the room, to the evening, to her. Her heel caught the edge of the event carpet runner. She went down hard, one knee, then both, the champagne flute shattering against the marble floor in a bright spray of glass. The diamond necklace swung forward on its chain and struck her collarbone. She caught herself on both palms, and she was on her hands and knees in the center of that luminous ballroom, and the sound that came out of her was not words. It was grief. Unguarded, unglamorous, unperformed grief. The kind that does not know it has an audience because it is too large to care. The kind that arrives when the last possible version of a story you have been telling yourself finally collapses. She sobbed, both palms flat on the cold marble, sobbing. No one rushed forward, not immediately. Not because the room was without kindness. These were decent people, most of them. but because there are moments of honest reckoning that must be witnessed to mean anything. And every person in that ballroom understood they were inside one. Across the room, Darius Langford had been making a quiet, unhurried movement toward the service corridor exit near the far wall. He was approximately 12 feet from the door when the two security officers stationed there, coordinated by Aisha that afternoon because Aisha coordinated everything, stepped forward simultaneously and filled the frame with their presence. "Mr. Langford," said the taller one calmly, "please stay where you are." Darius stopped. He looked at the officer. He looked at Aisha, who was watching him with the composed, unsurprised expression of someone who had anticipated this precise moment and built it into the plan accordingly. He stayed. A hotel staff member helped Brianna to her feet. She was past the point of controlling herself. Great, trembling sobs, her makeup streaked, her hair coming loose from the carefully constructed updo she had spent an hour on that afternoon. She looked across the room at Malik. She was searching his face for something. Anger, perhaps. Satisfaction. The particular cruelty of a man who has won and wants to make sure the other person feels the full weight of it. She did not find any of those things. What she found was harder to bear than all of them combined. Sorrow. Plain, genuine, long-worn sorrow. The quiet grief of a man who had loved his wife faithfully for 14 years, had watched her choose destruction over and over again across 18 months, and had not enjoyed a single moment of being right about where it was all heading. "You hid all of this from me," she said. Her voice was stripped of everything practiced. It was not an accusation. It was the sound of someone finally grasping the full dimensions of what they had missed. Malik was quiet for a moment. "No," he said gently. "I did not hide it from you. I prepared for it. Those are two very different things." He held the folded letter for a moment, then returned it to his breast pocket. "And I did not do this for revenge, Brianna. Your father asked me to protect what he built. That is what I did. Nothing more." He looked at her one final time, the long, honest look of a man saying a farewell he had already privately made his peace with. Then he nodded at Aisha. She was already on her phone. The security officers walked Brianna and Darius out through the corridor at the side of the ballroom. The room murmured. The chandeliers burned on, indifferent and bright. Malik stood at the center of it all and felt, for the first time in 18 months, the clean, settled quiet of something finished. What the Atlanta courts ordered next, and the life Malik had been quietly and carefully building while his wife was busy spending what she thought was hers, is the part of this story that will stay with you long after it is over. The legal proceedings moved with the kind of efficiency that only happens when the documentation is airtight and the opposing side has nothing left to argue with. Aisha Thompson filed the civil fraud complaint the Monday morning following the party. The forensic audit had been in final form for 3 weeks. 18 months of work organized into 22 exhibit folders, each one cross-referenced and notarized. Bank records, wire transfer confirmations, internal accounting logs from Hayes Construction going back 36 months. $2.8 million moved in careful increments, deliberately sized to stay below standard audit thresholds. Methodical work. Patient work. Not patient enough. The Atlanta court issued its judgment 6 weeks later. Brianna Vance and Darius Langford were ordered jointly to repay the full $2.8 million, plus statutory penalties, accrued interest, and legal costs, within 90 days. Non-compliance would trigger criminal prosecution on charges of financial fraud and misappropriation of business funds. There was no viable appeal. Darius had retained a defense attorney the morning after the party and was, by all accounts, not sleeping well. Brianna had hired 3 separate attorneys across 3 weeks and parted ways with all of them. By the time the judgment came down, her realistic options had narrowed to two: pay or face a grand jury. She paid. It required selling things. The luxury SUV she had purchased the week following her father's funeral. A set of designer luggage. The wardrobe she had assembled over the past 18 months. The high fashion pieces she had accumulated on the Hayes Construction corporate account. Sold through a consignment firm on the north side of town, in the same neighborhood where she had once walked into boutiques as though she owned them. The diamond necklace, the one she had been wearing the night of the party, the one that had swung forward when she fell, was appraised and sold to an estate jewelry buyer on Peachtree Road. It covered a fraction of what she owed. She moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Smyrna. Clean building, reasonable neighborhood. Nothing wrong with it by any ordinary measure. The kind of apartment she would have described 18 months ago, without a second thought, as not for someone like her. As for Darius Langford, his legal practice did not survive the proceedings. The state bar opened a professional conduct review, and 3 former clients, apparently emboldened by the public nature of the case, came forward with complaints that had been sitting in filed grievances for years. He surrendered his license in February, 4 months after the party, in a hearing attended by no one who cared about him personally, because by that point, there were very few of those left. The divorce was finalized quietly, handled entirely through attorneys. Malik signed the papers on a Thursday afternoon in Aisha's conference room, the same table where they had first mapped everything out 18 months earlier. He used a plain black ballpoint pen, the same kind he used for project contracts. He signed, set the pen down, and looked across the table at Aisha. "Thank you," he said. She looked at him over her thin-framed glasses, steady as always. "You did the work," she said. "I filed it." "Still," he said. She held his gaze for a moment. For Aisha Thompson, what followed, the faintest softening at the corners of her expression, was the professional equivalent of a standing ovation. 3 weeks after the court judgment, during a routine procedural call, Brianna's attorney paused and said, carefully, "My client has a personal question. Off the record, if that is acceptable." Aisha relayed it to Malik that evening. Brianna's question was this: who is Elena Washington? She had seen a photograph. Someone who had attended the party posted it on social media, not with any harmful intention, simply the way people share moments of significance. It was a candid shot, taken outside the Grand Hyatt that night just before Malik went inside. He was standing near the car, calm, on his phone. And there, visible through the passenger window behind him, was a woman sitting quietly and reading, with a short, modern haircut, and the kind of composed, unhurried presence that comes through even in a background detail of a photograph. Elena Washington, 45 years old, pediatrician at Grady Hospital in Atlanta. She had a warm, direct manner, a genuine laugh she did not deploy carelessly, and the particular confidence of a person who has spent years in rooms where honesty and steadiness are not optional. She had first met Malik 6 years earlier at a charity fundraiser for Grady's pediatric unit. Hayes Construction had donated materials for a waiting room renovation on the children's floor, and Malik had shown up personally to oversee the installation. Because that was how he operated, hands-on, no detail too small. Elena had been the attending physician on the floor that week. She had brought the crew coffee one morning. She and Malik had talked briefly about load-bearing structures and about the particular courage of sick children. And she had walked away thinking, with quiet certainty, that is a very good man. She had held that thought carefully for 6 years. Not uselessly, not with any urgency, just held, the way a careful person keeps something worth keeping. 9 months ago, Malik had called her. It was a Thursday evening. She was finishing patient charts at the nurse's station. He said, "I do not know if you remember me." She said, "I remember you." They had been together ever since, steadily, honestly, without performance. Two people who knew their own minds, sharing dinners and slow Saturday mornings, and the easy kind of conversation that shows you exactly what you had been missing without ever saying it directly. They were engaged. The wedding was planned for March. Malik responded to Brianna's question formally, in writing, through Aisha's office. "Elena Washington is my fiancée. We are to be married in March." No additional context was provided. None was needed. Brianna read the response in her Smyrna apartment, sitting on a couch from a furniture rental company because most of her belongings had been sold. She read it twice. Then she set the paper on the kitchen counter and stood at the window for a long time, looking out at the parking lot below. She thought about something her father had told her once, when she was young and had treated a quiet, unassuming boy at school carelessly and laughed about it afterward. "Baby," Reginald had said, "the ones who do not make noise are the ones you need to pay attention to." She had not paid attention. Stay with us, because the most beautiful part of this whole story is just ahead, and it begins at sunrise on a penthouse balcony with an old Seiko watch, and the woman who always knew exactly who Malik Vance was. The morning light over Atlanta comes in sideways in gold in late autumn. Patient light, the kind that does not announce itself but simply arrives, touching the glass towers one by one until the whole skyline is warm. Malik was on the penthouse balcony at 6:17 in the morning, in a clean undershirt and sweatpants, holding a cup of coffee he had made in the French press Elena had brought over 3 weeks ago and installed on the kitchen counter with the quiet authority of a woman who intends to stay a while. In his other hand was his father's Seiko watch. He turned it over once, the way he always did, checked the face, wound it slowly, one careful turn. The small, steady tick it made, a mechanism keeping perfect time regardless of everything happening around it, was one of the most grounding sounds he knew. He looked out at the city. The skyline he had, in the most literal sense, helped build. 4 of the structures visible from this balcony had been managed by his team, had been problems he had solved in the cold, pre-dawn hours with steel-toed boots and a yellow legal pad, before anyone else had arrived on site. He thought about his father. He thought about Reginald. He thought about what it costs a man to pour himself into the people and things he loves, quietly, consistently, without recognition, and how it is enough anyway, how it has always been enough. He said it softly, to the skyline and to no one and to everyone. "I did it, Dad." The wind moved across the balcony. Below, Atlanta was beginning its morning. The glass door slid open behind him. He heard her before he saw her. The soft, unhurried sound of bare feet on the balcony tile. The slight catch of breath in the cool morning air. Then Elena Washington slipped her arms around him from behind, her chin resting against his shoulder, her warmth against his back, holding on with the easy certainty of someone who has nowhere else to be and has no interest in being there. They stood like that for a moment, watching the city together. This was one of the things Malik had come to cherish about her. The understanding that silence between two people can be its own form of closeness, its own language. Elena had spent her career in rooms with frightened families and sick children, and she had long since learned that presence matters more than words. Then she said, her voice warm and carrying just a trace of amusement, "You know the guest bedroom still has no curtains." "I know." "And the kitchen faucet has been dripping since Tuesday." "I know that too." "And your mother has called me 4 times this week about the wedding flowers, which I genuinely appreciate, but she has mentioned hydrangeas in every single conversation. and I just want to make sure we are aligned on the hydrangeas." Malik laughed. A real, full laugh, the kind that rises from somewhere below the ribs. The kind that had been somewhat scarce for 18 months and was now, quietly but unmistakably, coming back. "Tell her she can have all the hydrangeas she wants," he said. Elena reached past him and handed him a second cup of coffee. She had brought two, the way she always did, because she paid attention to the small things, and always had. "Are you all right?" she asked. Not with worry, just with the honest, direct care of someone who wanted a true answer. He considered it the way he considered everything, fully and without hurry. "Yes," he said, "I genuinely am." And he was. Not the performance of being all right, not the composed exterior of a man pushing through something. Actual peace, the particular, settled stillness of a person who has carried a heavy thing for a long time, set it down carefully, and walked away without looking back. Gloria Vance arrived at 11 o'clock, the way she always did on Sundays, carrying a covered dish, sweet potato casserole with the brown sugar crust, the one Malik had been requesting since he was 7 years old, and wearing her good church dress and the expression of a woman who had been correct about everything and was far too gracious to say so out loud. She set the dish on the kitchen counter, looked around the penthouse, the one her son now owned outright, the one his wife had told him to clear out of on a rainy Tuesday night in October, and was quiet for a moment. Then she walked to where Malik was standing, took his face in both hands, and held it there. The same gesture, the same hands. "I am proud of you," she said. "You already told me that," he said. "I will keep telling you until it is all the way inside you," she said. She released him and looked past him at Elena. "Now, the guest bedroom has no curtains. That is not acceptable. We are fixing that this afternoon." Elena laughed from across the kitchen. A warm, unguarded laugh that filled the room easily. Gloria winked at her. The hydrangea negotiations resumed within minutes. Later that afternoon, while Gloria and Elena worked through centerpiece logistics with the cheerful intensity of two women who have found each other genuinely delightful, Malik stood once more at the balcony railing, watch in hand, city below. He let himself think of Brianna, not with bitterness, not with triumph, but with the honest, quiet grief of a man who loved someone for a long time and watched that person choose poorly, over and over, until there was nothing left to choose. He did not hate her. He did not wish her further hardship. He simply accepted, with the full weight of a man who no longer had anything to prove, what was true. She had held something rare and real, and thrown it away, because she had mistaken his quietness for weakness and his patience for lack of ambition. She had looked at a man building an empire in the background of her life and seen only a man standing still. I did not lose anything, he thought, and it was not a line. It was not something he was telling himself to feel better. It was simply and completely accurate. He had his work. He had his mother's sweet potato casserole and her unstoppable opinions about flowers. He had Elena's coffee and her laugh and the slow, extraordinary comfort of being fully known by someone and fully chosen anyway. And he had a penthouse with no curtains in the guest bedroom and a dripping kitchen faucet and a Seiko watch that kept perfect time. He wound it one last time, tucked it into his pocket, went inside to join his family. This story leaves us with 3 lessons worth writing down, not on a sticky note you will lose by Tuesday, but in the small spiral notebook you keep by the kitchen phone. First, before you sign anything, a deed, a loan, a trust document, even a birthday card with financial implications, Read every page yourself. Brianna inherited $50 million and never once asked what was actually inside the paperwork. At any age, but especially after 65, when estates and inheritances touch your own family, sit down with a cup of coffee and one independent attorney you chose yourself. Not the family lawyer. Yours. Second, the people in your life who show up without being asked, who fix the screen door in July without mentioning it, who call on a Tuesday for no reason. Those are the ones worth a handwritten note this week. Not a text, a note, dropped in the actual mail. Malik spent 14 years being that person, and it was never once acknowledged until it was too late. Do not let that be your story with someone you love. Third, greed is almost always quiet at first. It borrows small. It explains itself reasonably. By the time it is loud, it has already done most of the damage. Trust what you notice early. Reginald Hayes noticed. He just waited too long to act on it. Do not wait. This story was written by a human, with AI as a companion. It was born from a simple wish, to awaken the belief that kindness still exists, and no matter how many trials life brings, there are always moments of justice and quiet miracles waiting for those who deserve them.